when you get down to it, I'm not a machine. I'm not a robot. I'm not some type of, 1 + 1 = 2, mechanical monstrosity. I'm a human being. That's why I have emotions. That's why I have feelings. That's why I have, thoughts that are irrational and illogical, right? Because, if we go strictly based off of empirical logic, the things that make the most amount of sense for me, from a financial standpoint, would be to eat the cheapest meat that I can get my hands on. It would be to, just keep my expenses down to an ultra low amount chronically, right? And, just try and simulate as much social interactions as I can muster. But the truth is that's not what I need. I need a real human relationship. And frankly, I don't just need one. I need more than one. I need a community, and I don't have one. That's a huge issue I have. And I feel disillusioned at church. And I feel disillusioned, when I did work a different job and I did, go out and do stuff with the people I worked with, once or twice a week. We just went to a bar and they all just drank alcohol, and I would have maybe one drink because I was I don't really want to drink alcohol, right? It was still enjoyable being with other guys. I don't know. I'm just kind of rambling here. I'm just kind of talking. I'm going to work right now. I work a night shift job. And listen, I am of the opinion that it's okay to have the mindset that an individual should want to work hard, in so much as that individual is actually given proper compensation for working hard. That's ultimately what we're all arguing over, of course, is what is proper compensation to hard work, right? Because, frankly, we have different kinds of work in society, and those kinds of works produce different things. A truck driver is not hard manual labor when you get down to it, right? However, they are chronically sleep deprived, and they're not getting enough activity. They're not getting enough sunlight. And something that's really messed up is they're sitting, and they only have access to food on the road. And it's not like they're compensated for that, not really. They're just kind of forced to just go with it, just work with it. And that's not a good thing, for a society to place that kind of burden on a man, on a human being, because it's a unnatural environment. Humans are meant to move, we're meant to stand, we're meant to walk, we're meant to have some type of physical activity every day. And a truck driver drives a ridiculous amount of hours chronically, and that takes a toll on their body. There's a reason most truck drivers are obese. It's because they only have access to, low quality food, and they're not active, and they're not even getting enough sunlight on their skin. Fun fact, did you guys know that if sunlight goes through a window, the UVB rays that need to make contact with your skin get blocked, but the more harmful ultraviolet rays actually do get through the window? So you can still get sunburns through windows, but you can't get vitamin D through windows. So if you're a truck driver, you think you get enough sunlight. You don't. You really don't. And that's assuming that you're eating a proper human diet, which, let's be honest, a truck driver probably isn't. So it's not so simple as I swing a hammer all day, my job is harder. It's not so simple. You need to really take into consideration just your quality of life in general. When I was in the military, the big issue for me was work culture. There was a lot of artificially stressful environments in the military, and those artificial environments were phrased and framed as just culture, and they were just framed as this is just how it is. This is just what it's like to be in the military. But the truth is that was a cope. That was a lie. Because there's nothing natural or normal about a lot of the traditions in the military. The only reason that they're there is because they've just been around a long time, and nobody's put their foot down and said, hey, this is not a good thing. We need to do better than this, and then there was other issues as well. There's a lot of humiliation rituals in the military, which I loathe. It's a very big reason I decided to get out, because I was tired of being humiliated. I was tired of being, the guy that just said, yes, sir, no, sir, aye, sir. I got tired of it. A guy can only really take so much. And some people are able to just go ahead and just desensitize themselves to it and say, yeah, it's whatever, I'll just do it because I get paid. But, I have standards for my life. I have standards for how people treat me. I don't like being treated, disrespectfully. It doesn't compute with me. I'm okay with being told I did something wrong and being shown how to do it correctly. And that's cool. I am cool with that. But you don't need to, talk down to me, but more importantly, talk down to other people. And then when the moment you try to bring it up and say, hey, you can't talk down to this guy just because they need a little more help with this particular thing, and then all of a sudden, everyone looks at you like you're the black sheep, I remember one time when I was on duty, I was basically still brand new to the fleet. I hadn't been there for maybe 6 or 7 months. And I was on duty, and there was a new guy. It was literally his first night in our platoon. Okay? For context, he was underage. Okay? He was 20. He wasn't 20 yet. The drinking age where I was stationed was 20. And supposedly the official story was no one knew that he was under the age of 20. But long story short, I tried to, and this is something I really think about often, I failed at. I tried to tell my senior guys, and really they were all just a bunch of dickhead lance corporals, but I tried telling them all, hey guys, he's toasted, he was drunk, he was clearly had too much to drink, and I was like, hey, he needs to go to bed. And they all told me to fuck off. And instead of saying, hey bitch, I'm on duty, you need to listen to me, I said, it's probably fine. That's something I completely am disgusted with in regards to myself. And the reason I was willing to do that was because I got conditioned into just listening to them because they were more senior. And I really, that's something I really screwed up on that one night. This guy, I'm not going to name him, obviously, he continued to drink, and eventually it was me and another person in our platoon who brought him back to his room. And he was fine, for what I could tell when we got there. He was, he was aware, he was paying attention to his environment. He was just drunk, right? At least it's what it looked like on the surface. But I went to check up on him about half an hour later. Maybe it had been sooner, maybe it was later, give or take. And he was sprawled out on the floor, face first, and puke was protruding around his face, right? And it was pooled. It wasn't splattered, it was pooled, which means he had puked after he had got on the ground. And, the first thing I thought about in that moment was, okay, how did he get here? It looks like he did decide to just take a dirt nap on the floor. It looks like he tried getting up to do something, and now he's on the ground. And basically my thought process was, what if he tripped because he was drunk and he hit his head and that's why he didn't get up? What if he got up to go puke and he was in a hurry? And I basically thought, what if he had hit his head? And I knew of people with major head injuries and it was life altering. I was like, if this were me, I would want someone to go call, PMO and take me to medical and get me checked out and make sure I'm okay. Again, I did not know he was under the age of 20. He was a month away from turning 20, for what it's worth, right? The fact is I did not think that he was well. I thought he had hit his head and that he needed to get looked at, and I was the black sheep after that. People thought I was a party pooper. People thought I was a snitch. And I could tell because they would go out of their way to have their barracks parties in different buildings. They used to just do it on the deck that we all lived on, and they had decided that it was a good idea to go ahead and just move it to an entirely different building. And, that hurt, right? Like I said, everyone's got different jobs. A lot of those jobs have artificial problems, and they could be done more efficiently, more effectively. But I guess my point is that, not every single job can be really explained in a way to where it makes sense the amount of money that you make. Like, there's benefits to being in the military because you have a low cost of living, typically, depending, of course, on where you're stationed. I had a low cost of living. I had low expenses. I lived in the barracks, and I went to the chow hall, and I just didn't waste a bunch of money on a lot of dumb things. I would spend money, I just didn't spend a lot of money. And, I was able to leave the military with a lot more money than most people my age typically did. I guess what I'm trying to get at here is that there's a lot of problems with work in general in our society. And I think our society needs to start actually asking the questions of, are these jobs actually compensating us for what we go through? My job currently is fine. It's really not that hard. It's a pretty decent, simple job. Part of the value I bring to the work is the fact that I'm there. I'm a deterrent to bad actors, and I'm okay with having a job like that. I think that's a fine job to have. Obviously this job is not super necessary to society, but it brings some value, and I'm okay with that. But the lack of sleep's really getting to me. I've had bags under my eyes now for months. I've complained about my sleep. I don't know. Just a little bit of a rant. Gotta be able to rant to someone, right?